I am also joined today online by Lorenzo Piccoli, a research fellow at the Migration Policy Centre at the European University Institute, with years of experience in migration studies and management in an academic context. Good afternoon, Lorenzo. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Now, I want to ask a few questions, starting with, can Italian flagged vessels, so that's vessels that are registered in Italy, are they allowed to legally pick up migrants in the Mediterranean, either inside or outside territorial waters, and then take them to a third country to apply for asylum?
So it's complicated and we don't know for sure. What we do know is that under international refugee law, a person has the right to arrive in a country, apply for asylum in that country, and then the responsibility for processing that application and granting the rights that come with it rests on the country where the person has arrived. Now, of course, if a person sets foot on an Italian boat, then the responsibility lies with the Italian state. What this agreement is doing is giving the right to Italian jurisdiction to bring people to Albania and process their applications in Albanian territory. Now, here we are in uncharted waters because what this creates is Italian jurisdiction in another foreign country. And I think it's a matter of discussion for Albanian constitutional law, first. Second, for Italian legislation. I am not aware of any other arrangement of this type. And finally, it's a matter of discussion whether that would be permissible under European legislation. The European Commission ran a simulation of a similar scenario a few years ago, in 2018, and what they concluded is that this would not be possible because, in all effect, what such a measure would do, it would bring an extraterritorial application of European law, and this is neither feasible nor desirable. That was the conclusion of the Commission in 2018. Now, of course, the Commission has not had the time to evaluate this proposal yet, so we have to see what it will conclude in this case. But based on what has been discussed until now, it seems unlikely that this can be done.
I also heard, and I came across a discussion online about this. So from what I understood, the centres within Albania will be Italian territory, essentially, under Italian jurisdiction, staffed by Italian officials, subject to Italian law. Now, I also understand that these centres will be closed, and that means that Italians will ensure that none of the applicants leave the premises, and if they manage to, it will be Albanian police that will return them back to the premises. People have raised concerns about this, essentially a sort of, I heard the phrase prison camp. Under Italian law, can an asylum seeker legally be sort of essentially locked inside a centre while their claim is being processed?
Again, it's complicated. In Italy, there are cases of what is called administrative detention, but within boundaries. So, for example, a person cannot be detained without an individual assessment. And in this case, an individual assessment seems to be lacking. And the person should be given full access to the authorities and possibly a lawyer in the country where she or he is applying for asylum. In this situation, it's very hard to see how it could be done. Italian tribunals have ruled against similar measures in the past. So again, what we can expect, I cannot read into the future, but it's very likely to expect some court ruling against these situations of detention.
It sounds like there's a significant amount of legal uncertainty here. I mean, from the EU side, from the Italian side, and then, of course, in the Albanian side as well, you mentioned the constitution. My initial thought was, is this constitutional? Do you, in your personal view, do you think this is actually going to go ahead? Because in my mind, I cannot actually see this happening realistically in the current form that we are discussing.
Yeah, so far we have discussed about some legal issues. I think even if we imagine a situation where this could legally move forward, there would be a lot of practical issues that would arise. Just to give you one example, let's imagine a person in Albania. Either the person is granted refuge, and so the person is brought to Italy, or a person is not granted refuge, is denied international protection. In that case, again, we don't know what would happen. In theory, the person should be repatriated by the Italian authorities, but we know that this happens extremely rarely. I think the latest statistics of Eurostat show that less than 10% of the people with an order of repatriation are actually sent back to the country where they have nationality. So what will happen in that case is that the person should be brought to Italy. And again, we don't know where. This would also mean that persons are moved around as if they were packages, which I personally find very problematic. So what we can conclude is that this is mostly a political maneuver. The Italian government is very keen of showing that something new is done to govern migration, to manage migration. And I guess the Albanian government is keen of obtaining some political concessions in return. Effectively, this is not likely to do much other than increasing the vulnerability of people who are subject to it.
I wanted to ask as well, from your perspective, so we've talked about the legal issues that come up, and you touched on it very briefly there, you know, this idea of just moving people around like they're cattle or something. Do you have any ethical concerns, human rights concerns about this plan? You know, these are human beings, they haven't done anything wrong, but yet they're being kept potentially in a closed centre. There's a big question mark over which rights applied to them from which country. What ethical concerns do you have about this idea as it stands?
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to the issues that we have raised until now, I think, you know, it takes a long period of time for boats that rescue individuals in the sea close to Italy to arrive to Albania. So you would have to imagine a situation where people who are already in a very precarious situation, maybe some of them have been traumatized, for sure they are dehydrated, and they have to endure at least 2 days of navigation, and then again be placed in administrative detention with very few guarantees of legal protection and respect for their rights. So of course there are a lot of ethical concerns regarding whether this is fair and just towards the people who are subject to it, but also whether it makes sense, whether it is really the most effective thing to do from the perspective of the government.
But I can't, why not do this in Italy? Why in Albania? And why is Italy so keen to go ahead with this?
So that's a very good question. I think the context for Italy is that the current government has been elected with a strong promise of reducing the number of people who arrive on the coasts. But what happened since Rama-Meloni, the current prime minister, took power, is that the number of people who have arrived went up quite dramatically. I think in 2022, the number of people who arrived in Italy through the sea was about 100,000, and now we are at 145,000 in 2023 alone. There has been a lot of media attention on this issue, and so the government really wanted to do something on this. Previously, what we had seen with other governments was also an attempt to find a solution at the European level through resettlement, for example, and the reform of the Dublin system. This government has tried to engage in negotiations with other countries outside of the European Union. Now, of course, cooperation is very important, and I think it's a great thing that countries cooperate to govern migration, but this is a slightly different thing. It's about moving responsibility away from your territory.
Lorenzo, thank you very much for your expertise and for your insights on this topic.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thanks.